Okay, we'll start our session today. So, hi everyone, good morning, and a very big thank you to all the teachers, facilitators, and our youth ambassadors for joining us today. Okay, so we are all here for the very special sessions of the Youth TechCamp special talk sessions today. Okay, so without wasting much time for this morning, so let me introduce our guest speaker for today. Okay, so first we have Dr. Sabariah Mohamed Salleh. She's the head media research cluster from the Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities of University Kebangsaan Malaysia. She is also the deputy director communications team for the Economic Action Council Malaysia for the National Economic Action Council. So she's also an expert in media literacy and was also one of the panelists for the last year 2020 TechCamp Malaysia. Okay. Next, I will also introduce our second guest speaker. We have Dato Dr. Ooi Kee Beng, the Executive Director of the Penang Institute and also a member of the Penang State Government bodies such as the Penang 2030 Advisory Committees, the Digital Penang, and the Integrity Institute of the State of Penang. Dr. Ooi is also a visiting senior fellow at the ICAS Yusof Ishak Institute, where he was the deputy director from the year 2011 to 2017. Okay, he's an award-winning author and gained his PhD in sinology at the Stockholm University, where he lectured in Chinese history, Chinese philosophy, and also the introductions to China. He's also a founder/editor of the Penang Monthly, Issues Policy Brief, and also the ICAS Perspective, and a long-term editor for the Trends for the Southeast Asia. He also writes commentaries for the regional newspaper and also a long-time columnist for the Edge Malaysia. So thank you to both Dato Dr. Ooi and Dr. Sabariah for joining us despite your busy schedule. Okay, so without further ado, please welcome our first guest speaker, Dr. Sabariah Salleh, to share her thoughts on media literacy for you.
Thank you so much, Hamima. Thank you so much for the invitation to be able to speak to all of you guys today. But firstly, I just need to correct an information. I am no longer the Deputy Director of Communication for the Economic Action Council. I left in March and I am now a full-fledged Associate Professor at UKM, and I'm also currently the Chief Editor for the Malaysian Communication Journal. So sorry for not updating it, but in the spirit of not misinforming people, I would just like to correct the statement. Okay, so today I have been given the opportunity to talk about media literacy in everyday life and how can we practice media literacy in our daily life. So I will start with sharing my presentation, if that's okay with the organizer.
Yes, you're welcome.
Right, yeah, right. Okay, I will be sharing my presentation. All right, so media literacy in everyday life. Before I proceed with talking about media literacy, I am going to talk a bit about this information disorder. Okay, so so what is information disorder? Information disorder is when we have abundant information everywhere and anywhere, on our WhatsApp groups, on our Facebook, on our Instagram, on our Twitter, with our conversation with other people, by reading the newspaper, it's everywhere. There's just so much information, and especially with the advance of the digital technology, right? So now anyone and everyone can be a content creator. Anyone and everyone can talk about anything they want. For instance, I mean, like I'm sharing here, it's about COVID-19 and the COVID-19 vaccine. So we have mainstream media channels and mainstream media organizations such as RTM, who also has made documentaries and talk shows and etc. And programs regarding about COVID. For instance, this one which is actually aired today, and I'm so proud to say that Shamimi is actually a student of mine. Okay, and so the title of the program was COVID Itu Benar. So it's like a program telling about this COVID situation in Malaysia. seeing that it is from a mainstream media, much more a government media, we can assume, okay, just remember the word assume, that whatever is shared here is supposed to be credible and something that we're supposed to be able to trust, okay? As opposed to things which are shared on our social media accounts, such as, Facebook and Instagram, so or even Twitter. For in this example, I hope you guys can see it. So in this example, it is actually a friend of mine who shared this on her Facebook account. So on her Facebook account, she shared about this FAQ about COVID-19 vaccine and what she thinks about it, in which when I read what she thought about it, I feel that it's like a misinterpretation of this information. Okay, so saying that nobody is going to actually, prosecute her in court or whatever, because she has the right to share her opinion, okay, as long as, okay, it does not, it abides by our acts and regulation. But what I'm trying to say here is there's just so many information. Even this text actually, which I got from a WhatsApp group in the place where I stay. Okay, so it's a WhatsApp group where somebody actually shared about what was supposed to be a situation in Sungai Buloh. Okay, and this has actually been debunked by the fact check lab team and found to be false. Okay, so these are the reason why it's very, very, very important to have media literacy skills so that we were able to actually discern and decide and think for ourselves, is this information true? Is this dubious? Can I trust this? Is this source credible? And etc. So these are the things that should be taught when we want to inculcate media literacy skills. Okay. So there are, like I said, in this situation, in this information disorder phenomena, there are a few types of false information, okay, and sometimes it's just false, okay, sometimes it's just false, but sometimes it is false because it has some intention to harm, intention and no good, like character killing and etc. Right? So for instance, type of information or false information is misinformation. So misinformation is actually usually when when we share something which we thought it's true without any intention to harass someone or etc. So sometimes we tend to do that, like we read something, for instance, like somebody shared on a WhatsApp group that there recently was a case ragot or something near our house, and it's a forwarded message. So what we usually do is that, okay, let's just share it with everybody so that everybody can be be more aware of their surrounding and whatsoever, without sometimes actually checking if that information is true or not. Okay, so that is a form of misinformation. So it has some repercussions when you share misinformation, although you thought you get sharing it with this good intention because you feel like everybody ought to know and everything. But when you do not check that information, it can have some serious repercussions. For instance, in Iran, somebody actually, like there's something went viral. Okay, it went viral that if you drink methanol, it is supposed to help cure or curb COVID-19. So 700 people, or more than 700 people, actually died because they believed in this viral information without checking it. So they drank it. More than 700 people died. I think it was 100 plus, and more people were hospitalized because of this sharing of misinformation. So even though you feel like you're doing something good, you have to stop and think, is it really credible? Is the information really true? All right, and then next is disinformation. So an example of disinformation is when you share something which you know is not true. All right. So sometimes it actually happens in even our local mainstream media. So this is an example of the 2017 birthday rally, in which in the Star and in most main mainstream media actually shared the number of people who attended the rally. The number they shared were much lower than the real number. So as an example, the real number was 10,000. They probably reported as 1,000 or something like that. Okay, it's something, the numbers I must say here, I cannot really remember the number, so this number is just an example. But that was how it was reported. And that is a form of disinformation. One thing that is dangerous here is that because it is shared on mainstream media, and as I said earlier, people tend to trust mainstream media and people tend to rely on mainstream media for this type of information. So this is again the reason why we must have this skill, this media literacy skill, so that our students, our neighbors, our friends, our parents are able to see if that information, even if it is from what supposedly credible media, is it true or is it false? Okay, and there are also an example of malinformation in which it has an intention to harm. And this is the example which I spoke about earlier, in which it was shared about, it was just a Q&A about COVID vaccine, and the way my friend wrote it, okay, it's like, it's totally a misinterpretation of what was being said. And it has an intent to inform people to not take COVID vaccine. Okay, why do I say this? Because I did analyze her whole page, her social media pages, and I could see she has a lot of these messages or updates, so status updates, which has the connotation of asking people, why do you need to take COVID vaccine? So this actually has an intention to harm, because as you know, our country now is like there's more than 8,000 cases, and we really need to have that herd immunity. And while she was doing this, there is a sense of an intent to harm people. So these are the types of false information and things that appear in information disorder. So yeah. All right, so how do we use our media and information literacy skills in everyday activities so that we can avoid, trusting or avoid believing things which are false? What I mean is, like, we all need to be more critical, and ask questions and not just accept things at face value. Okay, so to be honest, actually, we do use our media and information literacy skills every day, actually. Okay, so firstly, what do we usually use it for? I mean, in terms of students, what do they usually use? This, how do they usually use MIL skills? It's usually for assignments, for instance, right? Like they need to search for information, and they usually do it on Google. So so they will just type some words, and the search finds would be there. But they need to realize that same keyword can yield different recommended results. Okay, so because again, if you have heard of AI and all the algorithm, so whatever that comes out in our search also depends on the websites that we usually visit, what we usually read online, and etc. Or our preferred things that we search for, and etc. So that has somehow, that will somehow also influence the types of findings that you will get when you search for something. So this is an example of the same search. And when I use different words which has the same meaning, it will also yield different findings. For instance, when I write history of Palestine, in the images showed are this, as compared to Palestine history. So the images, you can see the way the findings are ranked is also different. And there's even this picture of this Palestine and Israel occupation on Palestine. So what I'm trying to say here and to make people realize is that Same keywords can yield different recommended results, and even when you use like the way you phrase it differently can also yield different recommended results. And we must also be aware that sometimes the first few recommended results are actually sponsors. What I mean is they advertise with Google so that their websites and etc. will be found first or will be recommended first in your search, and all the other sites will be at the bottom. Also, one thing that I noticed that even my children do is that they just, they're satisfied with just the first page. When you have these recommended results, there are a few pages, like probably 10 pages, which you can click to see what are the different things that you could find. But most people would just settle on the first page. So this is something that we must always tell our students. Probably the answer is actually at the 9th or 10th page, you don't know. So we must actually look and be more curious, I would say, to actually ask ourselves, is this really the only finding, right? So these are some things that we can actually inculcate among our students, or even among ourselves when we do our own assignment or work related search. All right. So also, okay, when you want to watch a movie, okay, I know now it's MCO, we can watch movie in the cinema, but we also do this. I don't know about you, but I also do this when I want to select a movie that I want to watch on Netflix, okay, or even on my HIP TV. So what is the first question normally asked? Okay, so normally people would ask or would probably do their search based on their favorite actor or actresses, okay? So for instance, this is Song Joong Ki, who's a Korean actor, okay? And this is The Rock, okay? And Rebel Wilson. So your search would also depend on who's your favorite actor or who's your favorite actress. Okay, if you do notice, if for instance, yeah, so I do watch a lot of Korean dramas, and I do notice all the recommended search or the recommended stories on my Netflix timeline, I would say, are mostly Korean movies and Korean dramas. And that really made my husband really angry because he does not like to see that. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that firstly, when you search, it's usually depending on who is the actor or actresses. Or number two, when you do search a lot about that type of genre or the type of movie, it will come out first or second, in the first few searches, okay? In the first few findings of the search. Okay, so aside from favorite actors and favorite actresses, okay, what else actually sort of influenced you in selecting, what should I watch today, what should I watch tomorrow? Okay, I'm so bored, what should I watch, what's the next series that I should watch? Okay, so sometimes it's our friends, so our friends will start recommending, oh, you should watch I don't know, Goblin, or The King, Eternal Monarch, or some other series, so you should start watching this. So sometimes we can be easily influenced by our friends' recommendations. It's the same as sometimes being influenced by what our parents say, or what our bosses say, and etc. So it is quite easy for us to be influenced and to have biases, because bias means you have a specific thought or a specific perception of something based on what people say or based on your interest. Okay, I will not be giving a lecture on bias here because there are various types of bias. But I just want everyone to bear in mind that when we read anything, or when we watch something, or when we even search for something, we always have this bias in ourselves. Bias can be from our past, from our experience, or from from what we read, or from our preferences, and etc. So there is this form of bias. Okay, for instance, when our friend recommends us a movie for us to watch, and our friend is a fan of manga and animes, right? So she or he will feel compelled to share how great or good this anime movie is. Because of her bias, she thinks whatever she likes will be also liked by others, whereas I like something else probably. So it's bias influence us. Also, bias influence us in how we read things online, right? For instance, bias influence us. Okay, let's say I am an anti-vaxxer. Okay, if I am an anti-vaxxer, I already have this in the back of my mind that vaccine is not good, you shouldn't vaccine and whatever. So whatever journal articles or etc. that I read, right, even though it talks about how vaccine has a high efficacy and etc., I will always find a reason, find an argument to say no, that's not true. I will always find an argument to refute the fact. So this is what's happening, and this is all related to bias. Okay, so next is my favorite. Okay, so we use media literacy a lot actually when you want to eat out. Okay, my favorite thing to do whenever I travel is to Google for the best food in Malacca, the best food in Penang, or etc. I like to Google that because I really like to try local food, and this is the same whenever I go to Hong Kong or China or wherever I go travel to. I will always look for places to eat, right? So we will usually Google, and sometimes our search results will yield various recommendations and 12 dishes you must try and 10 best restaurants and etc. Okay, please bear in mind these recommendations, like I said earlier, related to our internet search for our assignment just now. Whatever that is recommended, bear in mind that it could be a sponsored post, it could be an advertorial. They could have paid Google to ensure that the search for these places will come up first. So we must always bear that in mind. Okay, so okay, this is my favorite kway teow. I don't know if you have tried it, but after kway teow Auntie Gemuk, so Lawan has one of the best kway teow, and I would say this food review is true. Okay, but okay, sometimes food review can be deceiving. Why? Because sometimes food review are actually also paid review, meaning that restaurant or that hotel, restaurant, cafes or whatsoever paid the influencer or paid the reporter, paid the news organization to give a good review of their food. Okay, for example, a sample of Global Nobu meals in Nobu KL. So this is actually when they will call a lot of journalists and give them an opportunity to taste their food. Why do I know this? Because I was an ex-journalist with NST, and I always look forward for a food review assignment because they would definitely splurge and give you the best, the best cut of meat, and they would cook really excellently. But bearing in mind that they actually paid my company for us to do a review. So what I would do is, obviously, I would give glowing recommendations and say everything tasted yummy and etc. So must be really aware that there is a potential for this thing to happen, and this is why we must always, be inquisitive, curious, and have this mindset that, is this really true? So we must have that. Okay. Also, not everything you see online is, believable, trustable. See, what you see may not be what you get. I have countless times been influenced by various Instagram posts to try several cafes and restaurants because the food looks good, it looks so yummy, and then the photos taken at that cafes would be so Instagrammable and etc. But some cafes are so disappointing. I mean, their food is not up to par. It does not look or taste as delicious as how it looks. So we must always be, we must know that we may not be able to get what we see because there is this thing called editing skills, filters, color, how to color and make it good. And photography tricks. Like I'm sure you guys have seen this video which is going around in Facebook and also Instagram about how certain tricks are used to make the food looks appetizing. For instance, like this, what is supposed to be whipped cream is actually shaving cream. So things may look so glossy and so sexy and it looks so yummy, you know, like all this food and etc. But you know, the power of editing, the power of Photoshop and Adobe makes it will be able to make food look good, make things look so real, even when it is not. Okay, so there must be a skill in which we are supposed to, you know, we can identify if this is a real picture, is this really taken, and etc. And this is something that can be learned through media and information literacy skill. All right, okay. Oh, and this thing is so hot and so it's a trend viral thing currently now in Malaysia, right? The BTS meal, in which it merely actually has just 10 pieces of nuggets, fries, and a drink. Okay, so but a lot of people queue like crazy. You know, the lines, I mean, some people try to order food or through the McDonald's online app, but they are put in virtual waiting rooms and etc. On the day the BTS meal was introduced, okay? So firstly, it is so popular because of the BTS army, right? They have like so many fans and etc. So people were really like queuing and waiting. But there are also people who just wanted to buy because of all this hype and because of all this advertisement. So they were like interested, like, is it really good? You know, so using famous people, celebrity influencers and all that is a trick or is a strategy now used by a lot of companies, right? So, but I do see a lot of food reviews, even my friend as well who bought it because he wanted to try it, found that it is just nuggets. It's nothing special, and they felt, you know, they felt that they were like, oh, okay, I thought this was something new, something great, and etc. But it's just 10 pieces of nuggets with 2 new sauce. All right, so do not be easily manipulated by advertisements because advertisement makes everything look good, everything is great. Okay, this is the same for you know, supplements, you know, health supplements, which is supposedly you know, can cure diabetes and etc. So we must do not be easily manipulated by these advertisements and do not merely trust what you see. All right. So yeah, we also use MIL skills when you look at COVID info actually. So like every day you see COVID info and you notice the colors that you see here. Okay, so actually there are hidden meanings or hidden you know, hidden messages just based on this color. For instance, when you use red, you know, as for the case kematian, okay, it has an indirect meaning. You know, red actually, you know, spells danger, it's dangerous, and etc. So it's kind of extreme. So it fits to use red, and it could actually evoke this kind of emotion. And also using the color green. So the color green is like energy, renewal, and it fits the case sembuh baru. So when you look at COVID info, and you look at the colors, so actually colors have, you know, a hidden meaning, a connotation of something, right? This even goes if you look at maps, okay, at other statistics and etc. So always bear in mind, is there a hidden meaning? You know, is there a hidden meaning? Why did they use this color? Is it to evoke some sort of emotion? Okay, and etc. Okay, right. Also, one thing to remember, just because someone is famous said it does not mean that it is right and does not mean that it is true. So once upon a time, Rihanna actually shared this supposedly picture of what the forest fire which happened happened in Australia. So her one word was devastating. So this picture made a lot of people think that the forest fire really made Australia like, all red and then they thought that this is an aerial picture taken from above the sky, right? Taken by NASA or something. So it was supposedly a NASA picture depicting how bad the forest fire is. Okay, so since she is like a very famous artist, a famous celebrity, a lot of people started to retweet her or reposting and etc. But actually, this is not true. This is actually just an artist's interpretation of what is happening. This is actually a piece of art which the Rihanna misinterpreted and thought it is a real picture. So, just because an artist or celebrity endorse a product or say, some product is good and etc. does not mean that it is true. Okay, and even Rihanna, I guess she had good intention, by talking about the forest fire and etc. But her intention has misled a lot of people into believing false information, right? So, yeah. When you want to buy a product, we also use MIL skills. For instance, when you want to buy like a sports watch, like a smartwatch, which one should you buy? Fitbit, Garmin, Apple Watch, or Samsung Watch. There's just so many things that comes across our mind. A lot of people, Apple users would obviously be biased and say Apple is the best, and all these fitness freaks and all that would probably say Garmin, Fitbit is the best, and etc. Because this depends. I mean, their recommendation depends on what they like and what they like, and also their bias. So, as a smart consumer, okay, or as a media literate person, what we would normally do is to actually, search for the information, search for, the benefits of Garmin, benefits of Fitbit, benefits of Apple Watch, benefits of Samsung Watch. Or you could even, search for the pros and cons of whatever watches, or which one is better, Samsung or Apple. So there are various ways to search for the information. Once you search for the information, read and compare the information and check the credibility. What do I mean? Is the source, is the website a trustable website? Is it a website which you can believe, which has credible and it's not biased? So check the credibility of the website, and most importantly, be aware of our own bias. We cannot deny that each of us would have our own bias. Like, I would love my children obviously more than other people would, because I am so biased towards them. If they enter a competition, obviously I would think they would win because of my bias. So we must be aware of our own bias, because when you are aware of our own bias, you would make a more conscious decision in whatever decision that you make, or in whatever you choose to believe or not believe. Okay, and be aware of the way things are written. Sometimes words are framed to make it look believable, and the words used, and also they use celebrities and whatsoever to endorse whatever it is. So we must always be aware of what is happening and what is being written, right? So this actually, some of these skills, actually most of these skills are learned indirectly in school, actually, through subjects like history, geography, language, mathematics, or science. So like for history, for instance, we do have this project where we have to do, our project for PT3, right, in which we would have to look for information and, we have to look for certain things that our teacher would require us to do, probably do interviews or whatsoever for our history. So that is actually a tiny, it's a part of, it's a way for you to inculcate, or it's a way for that MIL can be inculcated in school, right? Even in geography, it's the same thing, okay? Even in mathematics, like, when you learn about pie charts or bar graphs and whatsoever, you will notice that sometimes the representation of numbers, the way it is drawn, and etc. is actually something that we can make our students or ourselves aware of. Like the representation, is the number a representation of the population, and etc. Or even in science, I know like back in my day, right? Whatever my teacher taught is whatever that I really believe, and I like no questions or whatsoever about it. Right, and I, as a lecturer myself, I know sometimes it can be difficult to handle questions by our students. I know questions in which they're like, "Are you sure, doctor?" and etc. But actually, this is something that we should encourage, so that we can build a society which is more empowered, which would actually know, what they are doing is really what they believe, and is the best option available, and etc. So these are some of the things that is learned in school, which has a bit of media and information literacy skills embedded. Okay? And I wish they have more. Okay, so having media literacy skill is not just the ability to be discerning or to know, to be able to distinguish between false and correct information, and to be critical and looking for credible sources and etc. Being a media literate person also means that you need to be able to be a responsible user, okay? And with students, what this means is they must be a responsible user on their social media, like their Instagram or even their Twitter, okay? I don't think students nowadays actually have Facebook, right? Okay, so for instance, when they want to publish or post something on Instagram, firstly, they must be aware that there are predators out there. Okay, so there are predators, there are people who want to take advantage of your picture, take advantage of your information, and etc. So we must be aware of who is our audience, who are our followers, do we really know them? Okay, and yeah, always be aware that there are people who would have the intention to do harm towards them or you, okay? And only repost if you are confident that whatever is shared is true, is credible, is a piece of information which is trustworthy, and it's okay to share. So this is why it's important to have these other skills, to be critical and discerning and etc., so that they can be a more responsible user when they use their social media accounts. So another thing is Twitter. So like Twitter, there's just a lot of information on Twitter as opposed to Instagram, because Instagram is mostly pictures. So Twitter usually have this thread about a lot of things, and etc. So some information can be confusing. For instance, the recent, the current Israel and Palestine occupation, of Israel. Sometimes the information is a bit confusing because you have that pro-Palestine people and you have that pro-Israel people. So that's just like too much and too difficult to digest or to understand. So if you are in doubt, leave out. Avoid retweeting if you are not sure. Avoid retweeting if you are not sure of the credibility of the information and etc. So avoid retweeting or reposting just because your friend did it. So we must be aware of our own decisions and actions, right? Okay, so tweet information which has only been verified. Okay, so information which has been verified are actually information which are usually already tweeted by credible news agencies and etc. All right, so empower yourself, okay, with this media and information literacy skills. There are so many other areas that you can use your MIL skills in our everyday life, including like, when to decide what to cook, or looking at the ingredients of some type of food that you plan to buy, and etc. So it's important to empower ourselves, because then only then can we bring positive change to our society, right? So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sabariah, for the great sharing about the media literacy. So I believe like some of the students also we've done this we've done this workshop during the phase 1. So we let the students learn the module of what's the news, so how to differentiate fake news from factual from opinion statement, and also learns about the photo in the news, where the students learn how to differentiate fake photos that they have like online. So yes, thank you, Dr. Sabariah, for the sharing. Okay, so without further ado, we'll have for the participants, okay, if you have any questions for Dr. Sabariah, so just click on to the Q&A button and submit the question. We will collect all the questions for the Q&A session later. Okay, so next, let us welcome Dato Dr. Ooi Kee Beng. He will give a talk titled Educated or Entertained, Informed or Fooled. So please welcome Dato Dr. Ooi.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hamima. Do you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
can hear you good.
Okay. Well, I'll be reading from a speech really. So, but I'll try to be a bit slow so people can get what I'm saying. Right. Well, good morning, everyone. I don't have lovely pictures to show you, and nothing of food or shaving cream or whatever. Yeah, nothing at all. So you just have to listen to me, and I'll try to be as slow as I can. Well, I was originally asked to say something about fake news, but I think what I have to contribute is of a more general nature. This concerns communication, more specifically, mass communication. Yeah. Now, we tend to think of mass communications as either politically informed flows of information or as mass media or social media content. I would like you to think more broadly about this and consider as mass communications any exchange of information or public discussion that is aimed at a mass audience, either immediately or over time. Now, example of these, of what I mean, would be advertisements, some of which Dr. Sabariah had been talking about, fashion in the fashion field, popular culture, and most importantly, education, right? So as I talk, I want you to think of education as mass communication stretched over, I don't know, 12 years, 20 years, whatever. Yeah? Now, having a mass audience in mind determines what, how, or when something is to be released into public sphere. I'm sure you feel that if you're writing or talking to one person, say your girlfriend or your boyfriend, you will formulate yourself quite differently from if you're writing for the Star newspaper or for a class project. Now, blogging, in many ways, is a new form of communication that tends to minimize the line, to erase the line between private chat and mass communication. And the charm and weirdness of blogs stem from this fact. It is also the blurring of this line, I think, that has played a part in encouraging fake news, inspired perhaps by the delightful insight that one can so easily fool some people some of the time, all people some of the time, and some people all the time. Yeah? So blurring the line between private chat and mass communication also allows for changes going the other way. Established and traditional mass media channels also begin feeling obliged to behave as much like chat platforms as they can in order to get attention. Visuals become very important. I think that would have been obvious to you when Dr. Sabariah was talking earlier. Now, text must have punch and get to the point quickly. Headings must be sensational and take the form of a full sentence to carry enough information to influence the reader in case the reader is not attracted enough to read the whole text or to watch the whole video. So you have a very long headings. And I think you would have noticed that nowadays headings are very long. Now, modern information and communications technology, especially social media, for all the benefits it brings, allows for fake news to proliferate, undermining a key value in communication of any kind, namely trust. Now, that is the long-term worst effect, I think, of the fake news epidemic that we are experiencing. Now, trust is something that needs to be built up. It has to be earned. This is what parents and teachers in general try so hard to achieve. They have to be consistent over time. They have to be reliable across the board, whatever the subject being discussed or taught. Not an easy task. However, losing trust is a much easier process, right? Building a reputation is difficult, losing it is easy. Trust relies a lot on a person's store of knowledge, his ability to network his facts, and draw interesting and sound conclusions from his knowledge. And perhaps most importantly, it depends a lot on his projection of integrity and dignity. Now, I don't know about you, but once I have made up my mind that a certain outlet is unreliable, then I begin disregarding everything that appears on it. I may not close my mind totally to it, but I begin replacing it with other information channels. I think most of us do that automatically. What all of you have been doing ever since you began accessing information on your devices or on your computer is to build information portals through which you get data useful to you, providing stimuli you prefer. I doubt that it is possible not to do this, given how overwhelmed we are by information. Now, sites that keep us entertained, we will save for easy and frequent access. We do the same with our favorite news sites, game sites, chat groups, reference sites, and so on and so forth. Yeah. But then we all do have some critical sense, even the most gullible among us. So what really happens is that we more or less trust some sites, and we do not blindly believe everything we see. We know that the reason we access information is always a mix of different wishes on our part, of us wanting to be informed, of us wanting to be amused, of us wanting to learn, and to be honest, of us wanting to be fooled as well. With this concoction of truths, half-truths, ticklish memories, and seductive associations in our heads, we go out and meet the modern world in cyberspace and elsewhere. My point is, we must not forget that we also know the world in this way, tentatively. We handle the world tentatively, we handle knowledge tentatively. We should not lie to ourselves that it is otherwise. Knowledge is tentative. That is what science tells us. That is the attitude to knowledge that learning scientific methods, be it natural science or social science, inculcates in us. Insisting that something is either true or false, I believe, makes us more susceptible to fake news. The best defense against fake news or any attempt to trick us, fool us, or brainwash us is to strengthen our ability to treat information and knowledge as tentative. That is why, over the last century, a strong trend has developed in academia and especially in philosophy to deconstruct abstractions and to contextualize statements and to consider all discussions as discourses, yeah, quote unquote discourses, carrying ideas knitted within a rationale peculiar to itself. And that the poetic element in common prose is stronger and more determining of meaning than we would like to think. We often communicate poetically, relying on the listener to have been trained in the lines of thinking we ourselves are using. But what about education? What about the schooling process? We are all students, you're all students, so you would have as much to say about this as I do. How is communication done in school among students, between students and the school administration, between students and teachers, between teachers and parents, over years and years? And all this happening with a national project in mind, overseen by the Ministry of Education and with curricula steered by whatever examination authorities are involved. Can we say that education is mass communications? If we can, should we then not be aware of traps and lures and baits the way we are when dealing with social media or newspapers, or when watching the television? Being educated and being schooled are different things. Being educated requires more perseverance than being schooled. Above all, being educated is a lifelong undertaking. It ends only at death. Being schooled is something else. We don't have time to go into all that today, but it's just a question I want to leave with all of you who are rather mature students. What I wish instead to highlight at this point is the slow road to understanding and to misunderstanding as well. Going for a quick understanding, drawing quick conclusions, trying to be smarter than the next guy, taking shortcuts and relying on our ability to formulate well rather than to know well. All these have their place, but they also inculcate in us bad habits, making us ignore complexity of reality and the tentativeness of knowledge statements. Now, these habits make us susceptible to fake news. Most fake news are laughable once they are revealed to be fake news, and yet we get fooled. Being critical, being more rounded in our understanding of things, being humble, being cautious, and reining in our tendency to act smart, to be the first to know. That is one way to not be easy victims of fake news. Lastly, I would like to draw attention to communication across cultures and to globalized dialogue, and how these are even more tentative and can be more misleading than communication within one's own culture and within one's own language. Have you noticed, for example, how ghost stories don't work well beyond their cultural borders? I don't know about you, but I'm more scared of pale ghosts dressed in white hopping in graveyards or in funeral processions than I am of Pontianaks and zombies. I don't care much about vampires, they don't scare me. Now, my fears, I think, are most at home in my own culture. Now, this is just an extreme example. But we understand things across cultures in more distorted ways than we realize. There is no neutral ground. There is no non-culture with whose help we can communicate safely. We always communicate in tentative manner, and we always rely on each other's goodwill and common sense. Yeah? Now, when we come to global communication, then, global communication is more prone to misunderstanding than we might think. That's why over time, we have a tendency to appreciate global videos for their impressionistic value instead, not for the facts that they convey. We become more entertained by them than being informed as well. Well, over your lifetime, your last 5-10 years, let's say, think of the diminishing nature of global communication. It's strange. Going from Facebook being very popular, and then we move on to WhatsApp being more popular, and then along the way, Twitter comes along with the very short messages, Instagram, which is more visual than textual, and to TikTok, which is just snapshots of funny things, usually. Yeah? So I think all that are reactions to people feeling that it's really very hard to communicate very important things to a mass audience across cultures and across the world. So I would end by saying that communication is a very complex process. It seems very easy. We talk to each other all the time, but we should be careful that it is very complex. There are many layers to it, and we easily get lost in them. And it is a skill to communicate and to be communicated to in a proper manner, right? It is a skill, and it has to be learned both on the dispensing end and the receiving end. And I leave you with this: mastering communication is one of the most fulfilling and happiest activities we can do in life. But that also, of course, leaves us open to all sorts of dangers and misunderstandings as well. Thank you. I'll end there, and I can take questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ooi. So yes, like Dr. Ooi says that it's not even that when you get all this fake news and all the information, it's also important for you to have this communication. So this is like important skills to have, because like now we have more and more misinformation that we have online, because all of us are currently staying at home. So yes, like I can say, it's not only between the cultural communication, it's also something that need to be found in the globally aspect as well. So yes, thank you, Dr. Ooi, for the great sharing. Okay, so now we will open a Q&A session. So participants, if you have any questions or any burning stop for our guest speaker today, so please feel free to ask. Okay, so you can also raise hand if you have any questions to ask. I believe some of the questions has already been answered by Dr. Sabariah. Thank you, Doctor. Okay, so we'll wait for any questions. Student teachers also are welcome to ask. Don't be shy. It's not always that we have a 2 media literacy expert in one time. Okay. Okay, just that I've seen that one answer that Dr. Sabariah answered in the Q&A. So how to validate inaccurate news from the mainstream media? So the example that the student gave is the current AstraZeneca vaccine registrations. So yes, I also I think Dr. Sabariah, can you explain more on this? Like amazing, because for me, as I successfully registered with the AstraZeneca for my parents, but then they do have some doubts about like, hey, do you know that we have the Pfizer for the 16 and above, and that was like one of the top vaccines that we currently have. So okay, Dr. Sabariah, do you know like how I can actually validate this? Or Dr. Ooi as well.
Well, one thing I think we have to be careful about. You can hear me, right? Sorry. I noticed first I have to apologize to everyone. When I was reading my speech, I think the speech was over exactly my picture, so I didn't realize that I wasn't able to show that. Sorry, everyone.
It's okay.
Anyway, one thing I would like to tell everyone is, and I think that could be one reason why conspiracy theories become so accepted and so popular. We must not assume that whoever it is that is sending out information actually knows what he's doing. That's part of what I want to say. Yeah. So let's say if I take an example from one of the slides that Dr. Sabariah was showing, colors. I think she was talking about colors, and some people use green and whatnot. And it's not certain that whoever chose those colors actually knew what he was doing. He just does it. But we who receive it, and depending on our own likes and our own backgrounds, we associate different things with them. And then from there, we can make the mistake of thinking that that person meant to do this. They probably don't. So even information from the government, and we look at it, the question was about how to interpret it, because the info is not clear and whatnot. We have to accept the fact that incompetence is always, incompetence is a bad word, but that we don't always mean to say what we mean to send out the messages we're sending out, be it visual or sometimes even textual. So that's why we rely, when communicate, we don't seem to think of it enough. We rely very much on the other side having goodwill, so that even if there's some misunderstanding, the person is smart enough to not go there. He will give me the benefit of the doubt, right? But then if you meet someone with ill will, you're going to have trouble. Anything you say is going to be misinterpreted and turned against you. Welcome to the world of politics, for example. Yeah. So that I would like everyone to always think about. That's what I mean about the complexity of information. The message you're receiving might not actually be not only the full message. Sometimes you're getting more than is being sent to you. That's what makes it very difficult. And then we've all become very global, meaning also, you know how it is when you use language. If I use the language that I'm very used to in my group of reference, the friends that I always use as my reference group, then I can use the language in a certain way. I can be very subtle and use all sorts of underlying meanings and whatnot. But then once I go out to a larger audience, and not to mention a global audience, then I run the risk of them getting things wrong. And that also leads to me starting to write. If I'm writing to a global audience, then I start writing in a rather as uncultural way as possible, I think, you know. But of course, we know that that's to form some kind of culture. It could be the culture of the academic people or whatever. So you can't really talk to everyone. You know what I'm saying? You cannot really send a message. You can send out a message and send it to everyone, but don't think that everyone's going to get the same message. They're going to get all sorts of different things out of it. So in the end, you can't please everyone. You're going to offend somebody. You're going to. That is the world we live in when we have global information, and so fast, yeah. But what I wanted to say really in my speech, I hope some of it did go through to the audience here, that you do need, all of us need a certain common background, enough of a common background before we communicate properly. And that is sort of what education is supposed to give you. That's what schooling, especially primary school, is supposed to give us, right? And that would be one reason why most governments want a national school system, because then they want most of their citizens to actually have the same facts, think the same way, understand the same kind of thinking, and so they are able to communicate with each other. But then once they leave their country and go to the neighboring country, they will start by having problems. So in a way, schooling, of course, is brainwashing, but I'm saying that brainwashing is necessary to some extent. It's only in secondary school, hopefully, that once the kids are able to communicate because they have a similar background, then they can start diversifying and deepening how they communicate, how they and when they cannot communicate even. Yeah, long answer to that little
thank you, Dato for the Okay, I've seen one in the chat. This is from the teacher.
Hanima, can I add on to what Dato
yes.
Yeah.
Going back to what Dato Ooi said about colors and you know, how some people use certain colors without knowing you know, what it means and etc. So actually I have shared with in other seminars and all that about how actually KKM use certain colors for the COVID map in which I don't know if maybe it has an intention to scare or whatever, which is not accurate. So I'm gonna just share with you guys an example so that you guys can really see it, an example of the map. Okay, so this is an example of a COVID map, and as you can see, you know, like this was in 2020. Okay, so the color red is used for Sabah, Johor, Negeri Sembilan, Kuala Lumpur, and Perak. To I mean, at one glance, you would have thought the whole of Johor is COVID, infected with COVID and all that, but actually it's just certain districts or certain areas in Johor, but the color is already red. So I think this is what is Dato Ooi meant by, you know, certain colors are not used, you know, with, I mean, they're not used with awareness on this thing. So this is an example that, yeah, I just
it says too much, right? It says
yeah. So actually, this is also discussed in WHO infodemic management conferences on how this you know, unintentional use of colors, of how you know, create your graphs and charts and etc. Actually has this potential to misinform or disinform people. Yeah, so that's the, just trying to, you know, add on to what Dato Ooi said just now.
Yeah, I say it's true. Like nowadays when they are telling during the press conference, when they are quoting a red zone, yellow zone, and green zone, so we know immediately that this zone actually represent what. So red zone represent, oh, there's the highest number of COVID-19 cases there. So even though unintentionally, but that is the way of people understanding what the color actually meant. So that's its own color theory.
It's a good example. I could add on more to that. Let's say you're right, Mima. When it comes down to zone, then we immediately know this is more correct, right? when it comes to that level. But sometimes we have to also understand that the government, the administrators and whatnot, sometimes they're not just wanting to give you the fact, they want to signal something, they want to call for a certain behavior in you. So sometimes they might exaggerate because they don't want you to do this. So they're not giving you the fact, they're giving you the facts plus some chili, so it makes you even hotter. So, so we're not just informing people with facts. We very often exaggerate or play down certain things. That is part of communication. We are not robots just giving the facts. We give the facts because we want a certain behavior. So in philosophy, the speech acts, right? The speech acts. That might be interesting here. So when you speak, it is an act. You're not just giving information. You're doing something because you want a certain effect. Let's say you're trying to chat up a potential girlfriend or boyfriend. You're going to be a certain way. You're not telling her facts or whatever. You're probably lying, but because you want a certain, and that is legit, right? That's legitimate. You can't say that's wrong, but that's how humans work.
Yeah. Because Dato, I think because of that intention and how people are probably not aware of, there's this underlying intention. I think this is why MIL skills is very important for people to be able to see that there is a underlying intent how the ways this message is being said, or pictures are being depicted, and etc.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I think we can open for the next question.
Okay.
Okay. So we have some for the anonymous. For me, I usually reflect what I had communicated or shared every time just to avoid misinterpretation. In which so far it really helped me to clarify things and understand how wrong people can misinterpret. Okay. So they asked, what does Dr. Sabariah and Dr. Ooi think of this method, and would like to know your way of preventing misinterpretation. Okay. We can Dr. Ooi first.
Wait, let me read it first. So I digest it.
Okay.
Dr. Sabariah, you go ahead first.
All right. Okay. So okay. So this anonymous attendee said that he or she actually reflected what he communicated, or he or she communicated or shared every time. But in my opinion, this reflection it's better to do the reflection before it is being shared or communicated, so that you are more aware of what you are sharing. That's my opinion lah. Okay. So the person said that it really helped him or her to clarify and understand things and how wrong people can misinterpret stuff. So I would not say there is a right or wrong method, because it's totally up to the individual, I think. But in my personal view, I think it's better to do this reflection before you share or communicate things. Okay, and also misinterpretation is something that is should be avoided, but sometimes it is unavoidable again because of this bias and their past experience and and your personality, their cultural background or whatever. People already have this bias and this thought ingrained into them. You can see, with the Israel and Palestine, what's happening. Like people in Israel are really condemning the Palestine because of their, their belief and all that. And people in Palestine are condemning Israel because of their ingrained belief and all that. So in this case, there will be some misinterpretation or misunderstanding of whatever information of being relayed because of their bias, the background, and their belief. Yeah, that's my answer.
Good. Well, I would agree with you. I would, let's say, try to explain it this way, how I think. Or maybe I should take an example from my own life first. Yeah. I've learned in my career that when you're angry, don't write an email. Don't reply to an email when you're angry. Wait, just wait. 100% you're going to think differently when you're no longer angry. Of course, when you're angry, you think it's more honest. I've had enough. I'm going to tell this guy whatever. But we don't live in a state of anger all the time, right? Quite luckily, right? Most of us live 90% of the time in rather cool circumstances, willing to show understanding and be understanding to people. So that's one thing. So the contemplation is also how are you feeling when you're writing it. But of course, we don't always have the luxury of being totally calm and then, you know, after an hour of meditation and then you reply to an email. We don't have that kind of privilege. But I would say that, let's say if I take the example, if I'm talking to this thing about misunderstanding and thinking that we have our thoughts in our head, we think it and then we talk it. That's not totally correct. I think we think as we talk, right? You know, so the sentences I'm giving to you now, I didn't have them in my head until I spoke them. Correct. I think that's what most of us do. And so you're bound to say something not exactly what you wanted. And when it's one face-to-face, physical to physical person, I mean, it's part of dialogue to say something and they say, no, I didn't mean that. Or you start correcting after you say it, depending on the reaction from the person. And say, oh no, I meant this and this. And then you start shifting. And that is communication. Communication is not a one-sided thing, which in cyberspace, very often it can become like that. It's a one thing. I shoot it out, take it as you like, kind of thing. But that is a different type of communication. Communication that is dialogue has a chance of correcting itself, right? So that kind of dialogue is easier. That might not be the problematic one. What gets problematic is when that back and forth does not happen or is not part of the process. And that then must mean that I have to formulate myself, especially when writing, in language that will not have effects that I don't want, consequences that I don't want to have to handle, right? Unintended consequences, as it were. That is part of communication, and depending on the context and the medium, I think we automatically adjust. So that's why at the end of my speech, I say communicating is a skill. It's going to take you your whole life to learn to communicate well. I mean, our world has changed a lot, but if I think back to people older than me, 10, 20, 30 years older than me, when you spoke to them, especially well-educated people, what was amazing about people a generation ago was that they could speak to you in a full flow, straight from the head, as if they're writing. And they won't repeat themselves. And they won't go, like some, like, you know, none of that. I think that has slowly disappeared. We are now more willing for people to be more unformulated as they speak, and then they formulate themselves as they speak in the open, as it were. You know, the thinking now happens between people in a more obvious sense than it used to be when people actually read a lot and wrote a lot, so that they formulated their sentence. They learned to formulate sentences within their heads very clearly before they spoke them. I think that skill is not as valued today, so we rely very much on being unclear as we speak, and then we correct ourselves as we speak. You know, so it's.
I think like this one also, like the examples that we have now online that I've seen a lot is like you know, when someone speak about different culture in a wrong statement or something. So instead of like we call this on Twitter, it's like a cancel culture. So instead of making those people say, oh, you misunderstood this, you said this wrong enough. So instead of telling them off or canceling them, we have these people who actually try to educate. So we have educate culture, where those people who have this misinterpretation online, so we reply with a thread saying that, oh, this is actually wrong. So this is something it's supposed to be like this. So like Dr. Ooi say, that the communication dialogues need to happen nowadays. So because if you left that person with no information, no correct information based on what he said, that person just gonna stick with that information forever, unless people have the ability to actually fix what his statements are saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on to the next question. Okay. So I believe this is from a teacher. Okay. So she or he said, how do we inculcate in students the importance of being listening user of information and being responsible communicators and not give in to the copy and paste tendency when trying to copy yourself? Okay. I think it's for me also.
Definitely.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Sabariah, what do you guys think of this question?
Okay, so copy and paste tendency is so normal. I mean, I teach at university. I see a lot of my students doing that. What I do is I will give them 0 when they plagiarize. Okay, but okay. So having said that, okay, so how do we inculcate the importance of being listening and to avoid this copy and paste culture is actually we must talk to our students and we must actually educate them on how do we do a good search, how do we search, do an effective and efficient search for information in our for our assignments, for instance. Also, I think they must be aware of the consequences of this copy and paste situation phenomena. The consequences, and another thing that I learned while being a lecturer is that we cannot just say no. You don't do this, don't do that. I mean, this is something I also learned as a parent. You cannot just say no, don't do it, and etc. We must actually explain how do you do it better, how do you do it the best way, and why do we say no, don't do that in that way, and explanation must be given. As a lecturer, it's very impossible for me to expect my student to submit like an assignment which is not plagiarized or not copy and pasted if actually do not teach them how to look for journals, how to criticize journals. I mean, in terms of university, kan? So how to be critical when they read journal articles and etc. So yeah, it's important to and also to lead by example, because I do see some teachers, what they do is they just take some other teachers teaching materials, and then they just use it, they can just copy and paste from it, whatever they find from the internet. Do not think that your students would not be able to find out. So by leading from example, by really reading and developing your own teaching materials, that is an example that you should, be showing your students as well. Yeah.
Yeah. My 5 cents on this question. Two things I would like to take up. I remember when I was teaching in Stockholm University. This was before students set their computers in their room. So the lecturing was different. It was more loose. I could allow myself to say things that were not totally true, but it was a way of zeroing in and helping the discussion. When I was lecturing in Hong Kong much later, everyone had a computer in the room, right? And then what Dr. Sabariah was saying sets it. It affects the lecturer. You're sitting there. As soon as you have something that you're guessing at, you find that you stop yourself from saying it because all of them are on Google, right? That sort of affects the free discussion going towards facts and understanding. So the search revolution has definitely affected learning, definitely affected lecturing. But a more direct reply to the question is, I suspect that it is examination centricness, being learning to be tested instead of learning to know will of course affect the behavior of the student. If I know that I'm learning this now, what I'm learning might be good for me to know the rest of my life, but I'm not caring about that. I'm caring about the exam in 2 months' time, right? So I'm going to learn and prioritize what I think will come in the exam, or so I will code my knowledge, my absorption of knowledge in a very simplified manner, so that I can return it to the examiner, etc. And that affects. I think I think it's a big bane in education, that that we make students think that they are learning in order to pass an exam. They are learning in order to be tested. They are not learning because it's fun to know. They're not learning because they think that the rest of their life will be about how rounded and developed their brain is going to be. And it will take 20 years. But they can't think like that. They'll be thinking, how do I pass the exam? And I think the school system, I mean, everyone would agree with what I'm saying, but I think the system, the school system actually, even if they understand that, they still think there's no choice. We have to teach students that way. And so we can't really blame students for behaving a certain way, because the system pushes them in that way. You know? And then, of course, always you have some students who are so good, they will do well anyway, whatever the system, right? But we're talking about the general student. So that would be my reflection.
Yeah, I think like this one, like you talking about the school education system. So when I was in school, I think like 7 or 8 years ago. So like I was the one of the first batch that received the critical thinking question. So we call this kemahiran berfikir aras tinggi. So I think like from my side, I think that's including that type of question will make me think of, oh yeah, instead of me just reading the whole sejarah books, figuring out what happened in the last 50 to 100 years. So they asked me about what do I think this affected, what do I think this could lead to in the future. So yes, so in education, we cannot blame because the system is like that. But then I was hoping that this system are currently evolving, and I also don't know what's going to happen to the next 2 years history books. There's so many things happening now. So yes, but then including this type of question also will make the students think more instead of just copy and paste.
And also, sorry, and also I think in new countries or young countries like Malaysia, it seems to be a common problem. Schools become too important. Schools as places of knowledge become too important. The home, society in itself, the mass media and all that, they sort of play a lesser role. And I think if we want to develop the whole of society, we have to also look at society at large, at our cultures at large. One thing that struck me after coming back to the region years ago was, I hadn't realized it before, but when we talk to our children, you see parents on the street with their kids, how do they talk to their children? As soon as they communicate, they don't call for a dialogue. They admonish their children. What you hear on the streets, I bet you, now MCO you can't, but you walk out and then you see parents talking to their children. What are they saying? They're not discussing Plato, Socrates, of course not, but they're not discussing things. They're telling them, don't run, don't fall, don't sweat, don't this, don't that, don't do this. Just instructions. And so that becomes the way of communication. Communication or language for the child becomes about telling people off, or I think it goes through all our different cultures. And that I think we need to change. That kind of thing would change over a generation or two as parents become more educated, you hope lah. And then they start dialoguing with the children at home. And then you hope that in 2-3 generations, then society at large becomes a society that discusses things instead of telling people off. We see that in our newspapers, that our politicians keep telling each other off all the time. Right? That's how we communicate. We tell people off. We take some moral high ground and then shoot away. That's communication. Now that's very limited. Yeah, thanks. Dr. Sabariah, sorry.
Yeah, Nima, you were talking just now about Hart's question, kan? The critical thinking questions or whatsoever. So I would just like to say it out here that even if it is a Hart's question, there is also an answer scheme for that. So even though it's a Hart's question in which you're supposed to think critically, but you are thinking critically within a framework in order for you to get the relevant marks for that exam. I mean, looking at my children's workbook, I know there are Hart's questions, but when they answer it not within that answer scheme, then you will still not get any marks. So
Yes.
my question, or something that I like to trigger here is that how critical are we actually, making our students or our children be if even the critical questions are supposed to be answered in a certain way? And this actually has sort of been questioned also in a UNESCO study on MIL education policies in several countries. So this is also something which has been discussed in it. So it's quite scary actually. I mean, even like what Dato Ooi said, and on the streets, people are just saying, don't do this, I mean, to their children. I do that as well. I mean, when they are bickering and whatever, I would just say, keep quiet and go to your room. I don't even want to listen to what you have to say. I mean, I do it as well. But what as parents we can do, I mean, on top of trying to discipline our children, we can promote discussion while we were eating dinner or lunch, asking them what they have done in school, what are their thoughts on certain issues. I mean, I do that with my children. I mean, we talk about certain issues at the dining table. So that is like an opportunity for us to also give room for our children to speak up or speak out and tell us their opinion and try to listen. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sabariah and Dr. A. Okay, we will move on to the next question. Okay, so this is a very quick one. Say, what should I advise a person who is sending message which are credible intentionally? Okay.
Yeah.
I think this one goes
is
for
about
both.
sharing, right?
For
About
me.
sharing, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is about sharing. Yeah.
Yes, it's about sharing.
Okay. I would say what I do is that when something is stupid, right? I look at it. This is false, and this is meant that there's ill intent. I usually don't share it, but very often it's totally fake, but it's really funny or it's really clever. But then you also notice what's good about WhatsApp, because you always have all your chat groups, right? So you actually, you know how it is, I'm sure all of you do it. You had something comes in and you immediately think, this one I will share to this group, this group, this group, this group, but not to that group, this, right? We become very good at that. But the question about what to tell people who actually share this indiscriminate sharing, yes, it's spamming. It's really, 2021 type of spamming. 20 years ago, when the internet was starting, that kind of spamming has disappeared, more or less. But I think we have a new form of spamming. And of course, one should tell people when you have to mean something when you send off a message. It's not without responsibility that you do it, right? There are no messages that you send out that has nothing to do with you. You have to be responsible for sending on something. That would be what I would say.
I think like this one also goes for me, from my side. I think this one goes two ways. If like the advice that I would need is talking to people from my older generations or talking to people with my same age or lower. So like I think most of the problem is to convince most of our parents or what we have in the family groups to say that, oh, this is misleading. And like because if it towards your friends or toward people younger, it's easier for you because they believe, oh, you are adult, you are a bit older, so you understand this type of statement better. But Dr. Sabariah, I just ask you, so do you have any advice for older generations, let's say?
Yeah, so actually the thing about intentionally sharing information which is not credible is quite sensitive when you want to sort of, call them out for doing it. You are not sure if that person is really sharing it believing that it is not true. Sometimes people share it because they feel that it is true. That's why they start sharing it on a WhatsApp group and etc. It's like I'm being a caring neighbor and whatsoever. So it is something quite difficult to go or to advise people. And as you said, Mima, just now, it is difficult, especially when that person is older, because I mean, you know, in Malaysian culture, you respect, and you know, you have to respect your elders. You're not supposed to question, and etc. So, what my advice is that, seeing that how emotional and sensitive they are, especially with their age sometimes, do not, for me lah, do not say, hey, Ato, your message is wrong. You know, you don't have to like call them out and be personal about it. But if it's in a, let's say if it's in a family WhatsApp group, for instance, what you can do is after they have pasted whatever thing that they wanted to paste, then you can paste whatever you found which has debunked whatever that person has said. So this actually really happened in my Kejiranan WhatsApp group. Okay, so we have a Kejiranan WhatsApp group which has a lot of this machi-machi, and they really shared. This one lady was really adamant in sharing false information about AZ. So she was like sharing a lot of that, you know, like this mufti said this is not halal and whatever things that she's sort of found. And what we did was, we did not say, Kak, this is wrong or whatever. What we did as like a group of us, what we did was we started to share information which debunked whatever she has said earlier. So that way, then they won't really feel that it's personal, because there are people who say, Kak, this information is wrong. Then her reply was, it's up to me. Whatever information I want to share is up to me. Why do you care? If you don't feel that it's true, then don't read it. You know, that kind of retort or that kind of reaction. So to avoid that reaction and to make your relationship with your neighbor sour, so what you can do is you can share this correct information, which is like really debunking what she or he said, but without really telling it. So that's probably something that you can do.
I think like you was quoting about the vaccine. Yeah. So like the example from my family is like my parents is near the age of 60, but then they couldn't pass to the qualification to receive the Pfizer. So what they could get is the next one is the AZ, the AstraZeneca vaccine. So my mom, she was wondering like, they say Pfizer is the top vaccine. So why didn't I get those? Why did I get the second choice or the third choice? Like the Sinovac and everything. So like what I did was Dr. Sabariah said debunk what her thoughts is, like by showing her like, oh, this is the scientific investigation that they've done, the research that they've done based on the vaccine, and it's differ in every place in the world. Yeah. So like the Sabariah said it's true, like it's like for me it's actually hard because like the way that she understands the thing is, oh, Pfizer is the first choice. So that what all people want, but then we get the second choice. You know how Malaysian parents are about the numbering. So like the first one, they say like, oh, why didn't I get the first choice? Why they are giving me the what do you call like tepi punya, like the extra parts, right? So yes, I think that one of the ways is for us to politely show them that, oh, this is wrong. So it's supposed to be like this. So instead of, hey, this is wrong, why you're sharing this, instead of being angry to them, so we help them to understand that. So it's more like educating to them as well. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sabariah, for that answer. Okay, I think we have last question in the house. Okay. Yes, I think this one also related to the discussion that we have. Is it true that people from rural areas are more inclined to believe false information?
Can I go first?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I that's saying a little too. It's too general a statement, of course, but I think it's not about rural and urban. It's about many other factors going on at the same time, I think. Partly, I assume one could say exposure in the sense that exposure is important. So I suppose the one asking the question might be thinking, well, we assume then that rural people, they don't move around, there's very low mobility, and so they live in their own little world, kind of idea. So okay, so I would say, okay, let's translate that into level of exposure instead. But nowadays we do have the internet and whatnot, so there is a certain information flow even going to them. But I think having lived in a few countries, I would say it's the scientific attitude that is important for the modern context, right? The scientific attitude that I find that, well, if you ask me why Sweden has been so successful in modernizing, why Japan was so successful in modernizing, their system very, very strongly educated the children in the scientific attitude. What you don't know, you don't know. You can find out. What you know, and what you know, you can know better. You know, that kind of thing. So it's some, and I would simplify matters into that. How scientific is your society? Once upon a time, I think I wrote an editorial called Parochialism in Cities, because I did realize that in cities, there's a hell of a lot of parochialism. So it's not a rural thing. A lot of urban people live in their little urban villages, and they talk a certain way. They do things in a certain recognizable manner. So if you're in a bigger city, you can see, okay, this guy is from Bangsa. This guy, you know, there's a certain pockets of culture that it's sort of natural to humanity to want their own little community, their own little village. So you will build that village wherever you are. So when we talk about housing estate or township or whatever, what are we doing? Those are potentially villages that want, to some extent, it is also a human need to be rather physically based in and feeling very at home in your own little area. So one shouldn't fault that too much. It is all in all of us, but it's not about rurality and urbanity as such. I think it's about spreading this sense of scientific attitude, and by that I also mean that the person himself knows that what he knows and doesn't know, and what he can find out and default. That's up to him. Nobody needs to tell him this. That's what I mean by being exposed and wanting to be exposed. Perhaps that might be the key factor. We want our children to want to be exposed, to know that they are responsible for what they know and what they don't know. Not that this guy told me this, that guy told me this, teacher told me this, so it must be true. Well, find out. So if you have a stupid teacher, you're going to have a class of stupid students? No, right? Well, exposure. Yeah.
Okay, what about Dr. Sabariah? Any thoughts on this question?
So firstly, if I'm wearing my hat as a researcher, I would say there's no really empirical evidence which shows that people in rural area are more inclined to believe in false information. I could not really find any, I cannot find actually any articles talking about it. And it's also the same as, how old people are assumed to be more inclined to believe in false information. Firstly, I agree with what Dato Ooi said just now, right? In which it's very important to have this scientific society and etc. Okay, so going back on the rural society, firstly, it is quite difficult to say that they are more inclined to believe in false information when it's very difficult for information to reach them in the first place. We have some very, very rural areas which do not have internet access, much more sometimes, they only get newspapers like once a week and etc. We cannot deny that we do still have that kind of, population in Malaysia. So how can we say that they are more inclined to believe misinfo or disinfo if info does not reach them in the first place? Because this really talks about the digital divide in Malaysia, which is still happening. And this is also the reason why, according to a study I did, that the government focuses more in rolling out infrastructures to all these, rural areas and etc., as opposed to starting to really inculcate MIL skills among our people. Okay, so their budget is more on rolling out infrastructures and etc. So yeah, I do think it's not fair to stereotype people who are in the rural areas. Some of them may be actually very media savvy. Some of them may be more literate than media literate than you could think they could be, and etc. So yeah, no point in stereotyping or having this bias actually towards people who are living in rural areas.
And I would add to that and say that you're right in pointing out that in rural areas, maybe the flows of information, the diversity of information might be less. But that also means that they get less fake news as well, right? So the idea of fake news might not be as important to them as in the city. But having said that, I would like to throw in, well, then in that case, perhaps a lot of their fake news comes through their politicians. Now, having said that, I move on one more step. So whether urban or rural, I think one issue we should think about is constituency maintenance. May I use that term? So it doesn't matter if you're rural or urban. It doesn't matter what religion you're in. Doesn't matter. If you have a group identity somewhere, you can be sure that there's somebody trying to keep you in there. Because his existence or whatever depends on you being part of a certain group. So it's not that we identify ourselves with certain groups. There are people, that's society, there are people who want to capture you and put you in their constituency. And so it's multiple brainwashing. So you go through life with people in a queue trying to brainwash you. It could be Nike, it could be a religious figure, it could be a politician, it could be a school, it could be, take your pick. Everyone wants to capture you, and within that, they can give you fake news, right? What I'm saying in the end is that fake news is always fake that. I mean, I didn't talk about fake news, but Sabariah did that much better. But there's fake news that's intentional, there's wrong news, and then there's, it's a whole range of things. And some of it, because they're long-term ones, maybe that's my main point for today, why I mentioned education. When things are biased, but long-term, we take them to be somehow truer than things that are thrown at you immediately, So what if there's, we would assume during the Cold War, for example, that all Russian children were being brainwashed in communism, but not us. True? No, right? I mean, it's part of education to brainwash to a certain extent, like I said earlier, for communication to start. And then where the freedom is given beyond that for them to explore further, that is the key, I think. A basic brainwashing happens. But then whether you allow for exposure is the key, really. Thank you.
Yeah, I think like all of the thoughts and the sharings for the Sabariah comes down to our topic today is becoming a media literate person. So whatever the problem is, whatever the issue is, it's all became into something that skills that we need to have nowadays. Okay. So thank you to Dr. Sabariah and Dato Dr. for the great sharings today and for the great discussion for the Q&A session. Okay, so to all participants and the teachers facilitating our youth ambassador as well. So thank you all for joining us today for this special talk sessions. I hope you all get some new insights. I think I believe that Dr. Sabariah is talking about the information disorder and also the media information literacy skills in daily life. And Dr. Ooi is also talking about how communication works, even between cultures or even between the global aspect as well. Okay, so thank you both Dr. Sabariah and Dr. Ooi for the great sharings today. Okay, so before we end the session today, I would like us to have like a very quick photo session together. Okay, so participants, teachers, students as well, please turn on your camera so we can capture for today's session as well. I think we've allowed. Okay, so students and teachers, kindly turn on your camera. You see all the nice space in the morning before the lockdown start. Okay. Minjun, are you there? So I'm gonna give a few seconds for all of them to turn on the camera.
I will promote. So hello. So I will start to promote all the attendees into panelists so that you all are able to switch on your camera. Okay. Please give me some time.
Students, don't be shy. See whether you shower or not this morning. Are we good now, Major?
Not yet. Rima, can you help as well to promote the panelists? Thank you.
So Dr. Sabariah, Dato Dr. So we have the students who actually came from our first phase of the Youth TechCamp workshop. So these are the students who already went through some of the module with us, the media literacy workshop. So they have become our youth ambassador of educating other people as well on media literacy. And we also have teachers, I believe, they came from the schools who also have joined our, which have the students join our workshop before. Okay, I don't know who Samalina is.
Malina used to when I was teaching in Tok Labu last time. Malina was the one of the English teachers that I worked with.
I think we have like less than 10 people more. So don't be shy, it's okay if you didn't shower. Just see your morning face. Okay, Majan, I think we're ready. You're mute.
Okay, so I will screenshot. So there are 2 pages here. So so keep your camera on for like 5 seconds, okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Yep. Then the next one. 1, 2, 3. Yep. 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Okay, that's the end of the photo session. Okay, so thank you all for joining us today. Thank you both of our guest speaker for the great sharing session for today's.
Okay, and enjoy the MCO.
All right, thank you all.
Okay, so we'll end the session now. Okay, so everyone have a great weekend. Stay home, stay safe. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sabariah. Thank you, Dr. Ooi.